Okay, let's begin. Good morning. My name is David Clement. I'm director of the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, a lot of syllables, that is based here at Seminole, just across the hall, in case you ever wondered what's across the hall if you've been in this room. Welcome, students, and thank you for coming. And I see a few guests from the community, some of whom we know, most of whom we know. I also want to welcome them and thank them for coming. And I want to thank the professors who included this event in their class content, especially Dr. Rivero over there on my right in the back. The topic of climate change is one that transcends academic disciplines, and as you will soon learn from our speaker, is going to have an increasing impact on our lives, already is having, but more so as we move ahead. Today's event is an outgrowth of an ongoing project by the Institute that we call Sea Level Rise, What's Our Next Move? It began in 2015 with a two-day conference here at Seminole that was attended by 200 leaders from the community and citizens who are concerned about this issue. And now this is the fourth follow-up event in that ongoing project to help people understand climate change better and to prepare and hopefully enact policies that help us deal with it as we go ahead. The blue books on the front of desk here are a record of that two-day conference. If you haven't gotten one, please pick one up. It tells you the background, all you need to know about this project so you can be better educated. So to today's program. Our speaker is an amazing and very accomplished young lady. Delaney Reynolds graduated just 2 weeks ago from Palmer Trinity High School in Miami, and in August will attend the University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science on a Singer Scholarship. She is a graduate of the University of Miami Summer Scholars Program in Tropical Marine Biology and of Vice President Al Gore's Climate Reality Training. She is a fourth-generation Miamian and splits her time between that city of a few million people and No Name Key, a 1,000-acre island with 43 solar-powered homes in the Florida Keys. Her life is surrounded by water, and that's how she fell in love with the environment and the ocean. She is the founder and CEO of the Sink or Swim Project, you see on the screen, which is a 501c nonprofit, and she is also creator of its website, www.miamisearise.com. She enjoys educating and engaging people through her website, blog, school and community activities, lectures, television, and social media. And she's also active in advocating for public policy and seeking solutions to some of the world's most pressing environmental challenges. She serves on the CLEO Institute's Youth Task Force. She's a Dream in Green Youth Ambassador, a member of Philip Cousteau's Earth Echo International Youth Leadership Council, and sits on the Miami-Dade Committee of the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities. She is a published author and illustrator of 3 children's books on ecological topics. One of them is a comic book down here on the front table as well. And she's currently writing a book for young adults about sea level rise in South Florida. Her work has been featured in countless local, national, and international media publications. She's given a very popular TEDx talk, and she has appeared with comedian actor Jack Black on the National Geographic Channel Years of Living Dangerously, and also with world explorer Philip Cousteau on his exploration Awesome Planet on Fox. She has many honors from prestigious institutions, including the National Geographic Society, the George Eastman Young Leaders Scholarship from the University of Rochester, Gloria Barron Scholarship Prize for Young Heroes, Broward County Green Leader Award, and Miami Herald Silver Knight Award for Social Science. And she's a member of the CLEO Institute Leadership Council. Students and friends, please give a warm welcome to Delaney Reynolds.
Thank you, David, and thank you for having me here today. So before I start getting into a lot of heavy science, I wanted to start with this picture of cherry blossom trees in Tokyo. So it's normal for these trees to bloom in spring, and it's springtime now, so it's a good connection to talk about. And it's very beautiful, and it's also something that can tell us something about global warming. For more than 1,000 years, emperors, aristocrats, and governors took care of the famed cherry trees in Kyoto. Recently, the Washington Post released an article that said that from 1850 to present day, the flowering has surged towards earlier dates at about 1 week per century. So consider that in 1850, the average flowering date was April 17th. Now it's actually closer to April 6th. So also, the estimated temperature in Tokyo has warmed 6.1 degrees since 1820. So this shows us that the temperature has been getting warmer and that these trees are reacting negatively to this and flowering at earlier dates. And the same thing is happening here in Washington, D.C. The March temperatures are likely to blame for these earlier bloom dates. Since 1921, Washington's temperatures have warmed at a rate of about 2.8 degrees per century. So I want you to keep these in mind because they're a very good metaphor about what is happening with global warming. So as you heard, I'm the 4th generation of my family to live in Miami, and we've been here since 1910, starting with my great-grandfather. And I often like to say that my life is surrounded by water because, as you heard, I split my time between the cosmopolitan city of a few million people and a 1,000-acre island with just 43 solar-powered homes on it called No Name Key. If you haven't heard of No Name Key, then it's possible that you've heard of the Key Deer. And if you haven't heard of the Key Deer, you might have heard of the No Name Pub. So as I've been growing up, the natural environment has really influenced me, and that led me to write, illustrate, and publish 3 children's books on ecology topics in between elementary and middle school. And along the way, as I was researching for these books, I learned more and more about climate change and how it was affecting the island of No Name Key. And I decided that I wanted to write my 4th book for young adults about climate change and sea level rise. And that led me to start researching the book by interviewing dozens and dozens of people, maybe as many as 100 by now, including some people that are scientists, business owners, policymakers, and everywhere in between. The point of the book is to tell stories of real people who are being impacted right now, and to also talk about how we can help solve the problem, as well as show some of the science. And as I wrote and researched the book, I decided to create what I call the Sink or Swim Project, and along with it, my website, miamisearise.com, which is an educational and political advocacy initiative, and is actually now, as you heard, a 501c nonprofit organization. So what I do is I go into the community and I speak at schools, whether it's elementary, middle, high schools, colleges, or adult groups, and lots of other places. And I talk about climate change and how it's affecting South Florida or wherever I'm lecturing, and I also talk about solutions. So as I do that, this is a picture of 3rd and 4th graders, and even children this young understand the risk that we face from climate change. And they want to talk about how we can solve the problem because they understand that smoke pouring out of a car or a factory is not good for our environment. These children are in middle and high school, and they understand that climate change is a problem as well. The kids in the picture on your left are from Mast Academy, and I spoke to over 1,500 children that day, and every single one of them understood the risk that we face from climate change. As a matter of fact, we actually had to add an extra session that day to talk about implementing solar power at their school because they were that engaged. And on your left, the other one on the right is Mast Academy. On your left is a school that is impoverished children from inner city areas, and they understood that climate change is a real risk as well. And these girls understand it as well. These girls are from India, and as a matter of fact, this presentation took place at 11 p.m. in Miami, but 10 a.m. there in India through Skype. And I gave them my entire climate change talk, and they understood it. And they're extremely concerned. They had about an hour of excellent questions about what they could do in their community to help with climate change. And their region is especially at risk because where they live, which is near Bangladesh, almost 50 million people could be displaced because of climate change and become climate refugees. So they were very interested in solutions. Now, these are some of the slides that I use when I present to children. On your right are some examples of that, and it's carbon dioxide growth, population growth, sea level rise growth, and I'll show you some of those in a moment. And then on your left is a picture of the comic book that I wrote and illustrated, which all of you should have gotten, and if you didn't, see me afterwards and I can give it to you guys. So what I do when I give these presentations is I do not dumb down the material. I use real science from the IPCC reports, NASA, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and the children understand it, no matter what the age is. So now let me share with you some of the science. This is a population graph, as you can tell, and what it shows is that over 200 years, the population has grown by 6 billion. And the end of the blue line is where we are today. Can anyone tell me what our current population is?
7.7 billion.
Yeah. So our current population is about 7 billion, and that's where the blue line ends. The other three colors, the red, orange, and green, are where scientists predict that our population could go in the future. And I want you to notice that all three of those lines are increasing. So more people means more cars. It means more factories, which means more carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, which leads to more climate change. And speaking of carbon dioxide, this is called the Keeling curve, and it's one of the most important images in climate science. And basically what it shows is the growth of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere since the 1950s. At the start of the Industrial Revolution, scientists believed that there was about 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. By 1958, that amount had grown to 313 parts per million. And today, we have over 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, which is an alarmingly dangerous rate. This next graph is a temperature graph, and man has been able to scientifically measure the temperature of our Earth since 1880. In fact, 2014 was the warmest year on record in all of those measurements, until 2015, which broke the record, until 2016. Last year, which broke the record again. So we have had 3 consecutive years of the warmest years since 1880. So all of us can read a thermometer. So there really is no debate. The Earth has been warming, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. Now, I share this next graph because it's a combination of the last two, the carbon dioxide and the temperature graph. And what I want you to notice when you look at this is that both of those lines trend in the same direction, kind of like a hockey stick, both increasing, as does the population graph. And this correlation, I don't believe that this is a coincidence. This is happening because of man. So this shows the Arctic sea ice dramatic decline in the Arctic and Antarctic. Satellite pictures of the Earth first became available in the 1970s, and ever since then, the pictures that they have taken have shown that the amount of sea ice has been declining precipitously. Scientists estimate that we're actually losing about 13% of our sea ice per decade since 1979. So as our planet's temperature rises, so does the temperature of the oceans, which causes the glaciers to melt, which causes sea level rise. And the glaciers and ice sheets are known as land ice, which cover about 10% of our land surface. The majority of this ice is in Greenland and Antarctica. Satellites from NASA, America's space agency, illustrate a dramatic decline in this ice year after year over the last decade. Recently, I had the pleasure of meeting an Eskimo elder from Greenland, and he told stories about over the course of his long life, how he's seen the ice in Greenland literally become softer and melt away into the sea. And I'm sharing this with you because this is a real person. This isn't a made-up story. This is someone that brought an entire room to tears because of the effects that he's been seeing in his home country. So next I'm going to show you two pictures of the same glacier, and I want you to tell me if you can see the difference. This is the first one. It was taken in 1920, so it's in black and white. But I want you to notice all of the ice down on the ground and up in the mountains, and it's a lot of ice. Now, fast forward 85 years into the future, that's the same glacier. And this is because of climate change. So this is a sea level rise graph, and as you can see, the amount of the seas have been rising, and we've been able to measure that, and we've been able to study it in our regions so we can see how much it's risen in our lifetime. And this is another one, and it shows that within 45 years, seas will rise 2 to 3 feet. And this is a conservative prediction. Most scientists actually estimate that seas could rise closer to 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 feet. And this 3 feet is set in stone because of what we've already done in the past when it comes to climate change. So seas are going to rise 3 feet. Now it's just a matter of how much can we stop it from rising further. So this is a house in Miami where I live, and it's actually not on the coast. So it's a pretty normal house, normal street, normal driveway, and there's even a drainage system there. Now, this is the same house with the effects of sea level rise. Salt water has bubbled up through that drainage system so much so that this man was able to float in it. So how can we solve this problem? One of my favorite possible solutions to talk about is solar power. One of my dreams is actually to see the Sunshine State of Florida become known as the Solar State, because I've read reports that say that 50% of all of Florida's power needs could come from the sun by 2045 if we were to just start taking that goal seriously. So I see no reason why we couldn't transform the Sunshine State into the Solar State. So as I said, most experts predict that 50% of our energy could come from solar. But as we all know, 50% isn't 100%. So this is a picture of the Shippingport Power Plant in Pennsylvania in 1957, and it's the first nuclear reactor to ever supply electricity to a grid. And the reason I'm showing you this is because nuclear power will probably have to play an important role in our future, but not the nuclear power that we have in place today. I say this, I'm not a fan of nuclear power, but there is a new technology that is called thorium-fueled molten salt reactors. And what this means is it fundamentally cannot break down, and it produces a fraction of the waste that nuclear power plants that we have today produce. So it's going to be up to our generation to create this new invention and to perfect it even further so that we can help supplement the amount of solar power that we must install in our future. Also, do not believe people that say that green energy will take away people's jobs, because this is absolutely not the case. None of us arrived here today through a horse-drawn carriage or wagon. However, if it were the 1700s, then that was the state of the art in transportation and is exactly how you would have gotten here. If it were the late 1800s to early 1900s, chances are you would have gotten here in the new invention called the automobile. And the people that worked in the horse-drawn carriage industry had to transfer over to the automobile industry. They couldn't take care of the horses anymore. They couldn't create the wagons anymore because no one was buying them. So they had to transfer to the new industry. Before long, in just a few years, I suspect that most people will be driving cars like this, powered by a battery. So what we have to do in the energy industry is we need to transform into the energy industry, just like people did with horse-drawn carriages and cars. Another important aspect of the Sink or Swim project is what I call political advocacy. So before I get into politics, let me be clear. I'm not speaking as a Democrat or a Republican. I'm not even old enough to vote. I'm speaking as a concerned citizen for our planet. So if our society does not stop protecting special interests and the special interest industry, we will never be able to solve the climate change problem. If all we do is protect the fossil fuel industry, we will never see the widespread use of solar and other sustainable power solutions. In fact, it should be the job of everyone here, all of us, to put the oil companies out of business so that we can start to transform into the solar industry. It's disgraceful that they are allowed to lie to the public and actually write, not suggest, but verbatim write legislation that goes against the will of voters when it comes to things like solar. So all of us must work together to make this possible. So as part of the book research, I wrote to the State of Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And the good news is they wrote me back, but the bad news is they wrote back with the answer you see here. Unfortunately, the response to both of these questions is not much. The governor has not supported climate-related legislation, and as a result, not much is getting done at the state level. Ladies and gentlemen, this approach, the not much approach, has to end if we are ever going to solve the climate change crisis. So as you know, the governor has not only not supported climate change legislation, but he has also banned the terms climate change, sea level rise, and global warming here in our state government. And that is completely wrong. It's not only been widely reported in the local media and press, but the global warming and sea level rise problem is a national one. We deserve better. We don't have to be scientists to understand that this problem is going to affect all of our futures, our children's futures, and their futures. And then there's my local senator, who thankfully had his run for the presidency cut short, but is unfortunately still our senator. Senator Rubio is a well-known climate change denier, and each time the topic of climate change comes up, he constantly denies that humans have anything to do with it. What I can report to you today is that children expect and will soon demand that our leaders take this topic seriously and make it a priority. And so in order to solve the climate change crisis, we need and deserve what I call a political evolution revolution. So allow me to offer an example. Miami-Dade County's mayor, where I'm from, often talks about climate change, but historically has never done anything substantial about the topic. So in this case, I was furious to find out that in his 2015-2016 budget for the county, he had not allocated any money towards sea level rise and climate change mitigation. And in fact, he only mentioned climate change in one sentence out of a 1,000-page budget. So I wrote some blogs about what was happening, and a lot of people read them and told me to keep pressing for funding, and so that's exactly what I did. I went to the budget hearing, and on the way there, in a furious rainstorm that had manhole covers literally lifting up off of the streets, I wrote a speech that I call Raindrops, and I'd like to play that for you. Hi, my name is Delaney Reynolds. I go to Palmer Trinity School in Palmetto Bay.
Hi, my name is Delaney Reynolds. I go to Palmer Trinity School in Palmetto Bay. I'd like to comment on the budget and sea level rise. As I drove here, it was raining, and as it rained, I imagined that there were millions of raindrops falling from the sky. In fact, there probably were. And as I thought about coming here, those raindrops were a metaphor for your $6.8 billion budget. And I thought to myself that just one of those drops is equal to the small amount of money which you are allocating in the budget towards mitigating sea level rise. First, there was little to nothing. Then $75,000. And I think I heard today about $300,000 were allocated. I'd like to suggest that that's not enough, that our community and environment deserve more. And in fact, I respectfully ask that you increase this line item to $1 million, and certainly nothing less than $500,000. What I've not told you yet is that I am the founder of an educational initiative related to educating children about sea level rise, entitled Sink or Swim, my website being miamisearise.com. And that through my work with this initiative, I can tell you that children, future voters, and their families, current voters, are deeply concerned about sea level rise. I implore you to show the world that Miami-Dade County is serious about sea level rise and dramatically increase your expenditure in this year's budget. We need to stop talking about it and start taking action to work together to address the catastrophe that our community faces. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Did agree to allocate $300,000 to sea level rise that day. And they also agreed to create Miami-Dade County's very first Chief Resiliency Officer. Since this meeting, the budget for 2016 was actually increased to $1.2 million. And the budget for this fiscal year, 2017, has been increased to $1.7 million. So these are small steps in the right direction, and it shows that all of us, no matter what our ages, can have a voice, especially when it comes to politics. So, as I said, the Sink or Swim project has also evolved into a political advocacy organization, and some of that started when I spoke in front of the Miami-Dade County Commission. And any of these things are things that you can do and should do. For example, I've had the opportunity to be involved with federal politics. I've met with senators, representatives, I've traveled to Washington, and in the 2 slides that you see here, I was even invited to give a speech at the Clinton campaign's only environmentally focused rally. Not only was I able to speak about my work and what's been happening in our community, but I was also asked to introduce the Secretary and Vice President Gore. I've used the Sink or Swim project to educate the community in many ways, including a TED Talk. I've made tons of videos from the field to show people what is happening with climate change. And again, this is something that any of you can do. And just last month, I hosted the March for Science in downtown Miami. I'm very proud to say, as one of the founding organizers, that we had about 5,000 people come out and show support for science. And a lot of those people were actually there to show support for climate change and sea level rise mitigation. So the point is, if I can do any of these things as a 15, 16, 17-year-old child, anyone can do them. And I would implore you to become involved, whether it's voting or telling your friends and family to vote or using social media to promote voting. Any way is helpful. Now, before I wrap up, I'd like to share a bit of extremely recent 2016 polling that is very interesting. So I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's from Yale University, and this first chart is actually very encouraging. It illustrates the percentage of adults in the United States who believe that global warming is happening. So, for example, in places like Miami, San Francisco, and Hawaii, the percentage is about 80%, and you can see that in the color graph on the side with the dark orange and the red colors. All over the United States, the average percentage is 50 to 60%. I take these findings as very encouraging because it shows that we've turned a corner to the point that a large percentage of the population of the United States believes that this is happening, and that's at least half the battle, so this is very good news. This chart, however, is not as good of news. This one shows that a large portion of the United States, of adults in the United States, do not believe that global warming is caused by humans. And this shows that we have a lot of work left to do. Yes, here in Miami, which you can see in Florida, at the bottom of Florida, the percentage of people who believe that global warming is man-made is about 70%. But in the center of the country, it's closer to 35 to 50%. So we have a long way to go to educate those people about what is happening with climate change and how it is actually man-made. Now, in this last survey, I want you to notice that most adults in America do not believe that global warming will harm them personally, except for the coastal areas of Miami, parts of Texas, and California. Those areas on the coast are in the 60 to 65% range. But in America's heartland, they will see a seismic shift in their ability to produce corn and grain. So global warming is going to impact every single person in our country. And that's why these graphs are so important, because it shows just how far we have to go in educating people about climate change and the risks that we face. So we need to make change. And inspiration and innovation are part of America's culture. When President Kennedy called our nation to action in 1962, he inspired a generation. And that is exactly what must happen to address the climate change crisis. Our national and state leaders must come together to help change our ways and to invent new solutions before places that we all cherish. Places that I cherish, like the Florida Keys, Miami Beach, the Everglades, here in St. Pete. And the rest of our region are gone, lost forever. So obviously, had we not changed old habits and embraced new opportunities, men would not have landed and walked on the moon just 7 years after our country came together and set what was once a nearly impossible goal. It's time to do that again so as to protect our environment and our planet. And I have hope that we will and that we must do that. And speaking of hope, allow me to end with a short message of hope.
I want you to meet my protege, Delaney.
Hello.
I want you to meet my protege, Delaney.
Hello, Delaney. I've heard so much about you. Have a seat.
Delaney Reynolds, 16-year-old budding scientist, somebody who found out about climate change and sea level rise, and she's really engaged and she's really interested and she wants to tell other kids about it.
Is it true? I've heard that you are a student of climate change.
Yes, that is true.
That's very impressive at your age.
I go into classrooms and community centers and I speak to anyone that's going to listen about the problem. This graph shows predictions for sea level rise. And I show them real science from IPCC reports, Union of Concerned Scientists, NASA, and they get it.
A message of hope, a message of solutions. And the surprising thing was it came from a kid.
Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about my passion, which is global warming and sea level rise.
So it seems like that's the trend with the youth movement.
Yeah.
It's like more and more people accepting what's happening.
We have to come together and decide whether we want to sink or swim.
Is there going to be a Miami when she grows up? Is she going to be able to raise her family here? Is she going to be able to live here?
What if Miami can't be saved?
Will you leave?
If that does happen, then we're either going to have to get out or build up. But I actually have hope that that won't happen. We will be able to solve this problem. I think we have to solve this problem.
16 years old and so filled with promise and potential and hope.
Have we given you hope?
Yes, finally, I found some hope.
We talked about hope. Can we do this? And we came to the conclusion that, yeah, we can. We just need to get kids on board and we need to get our political leaders on board. I'm very proud to be with you. So these are my social media handles, and if you want, you can reach out to me at any time and I will respond. So thank you again.
Thank you, Delaney. We can take some time for questions if you all have some. I'm sure she would be happy to try to answer them.
Yes.
Why do you think it is that, like...
Can you say it real loud?
Okay, sorry. I'm still waking up. Why do you think it is that, like, most other countries I've talked to have already started initiating, like, you know, charging people for bags, good recycling stuff, and, like, America, I feel like, is the one place that is just...
You can
like,
repeat the
you think that other
question.
countries would kind of force us into it, almost, like, it's just right in front of their face.
Right, okay, so the question was, why are other countries basically more ahead when it comes to climate change mitigation or just environmentally friendly policies? And I think that the answer to that really has to do with special interests and how political leaders, their pockets are being filled with money to keep the oil industry safe, to keep fossil fuels safe, because they don't want to change, especially if they're having so much money poured into their pockets just to keep these industries safe. So I think that here in America, that's basically our biggest problem when it comes to helping solve climate change. And you can see that with President Trump, and a really good example of that is actually, so the senator that I was talking about, Marco Rubio, before he was senator, he actually believed in climate change. But something changed between his becoming a mayor and sitting more locally and becoming a senator, which I'm guessing has to do with special interests. So that's basically, I would think, the reason.
Can I ask you if you know who this, can talk about who the special interests are, some of them?
So special interests include groups like the Koch brothers, and they basically kind of control all of the fossil fuel industry almost. And so they just pour money into these politicians' pockets.
And the utilities?
The utilities, so our local utility is Florida Power and Light, and they do the same thing. So I'm not sure if you saw this, but in the recent election, we had Amendment 4 and Amendment 1, and those were the two solar power amendments. So Amendment 4 was the one that was made by the people, I believe. And Amendment 1 was the one by FP&L. And so Amendment 4 was pro-solar and allowing people to control the solar industry, basically. And FP&L came back with the Second Amendment saying that they were pro-solar, And so they were trying to take control of the solar industry. And if they would do that, then they would basically increase the price for solar, make it extremely hard for people to buy solar, and that's not what we want. We want solar to be as open to the people as possible. And so in 92 years of business, Florida Power and Light produces less than 1% of their energy from solar power. So while they can run ads on the TV, there's really no competition because it's obvious that they don't approve of solar power and that they aren't proponents of it because it is cheaper, and they don't like that because they want as much money as possible.
Thank you. Just to clarify, from Tampa Bay north is served by Duke Energy, and across the bay to Miami south is Florida Power. Another question?
Yes, go for it.
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
This, I'd say, in short, is definitely a wake-up call. I didn't know the severity of it, but given that, how can I, kind of a two-part question, how can I spread the word to my friends so they can additionally wake up and see the severity of it, but more so, what are some small steps that I personally can take towards the right direction in making an impact?
So I think that in order to spread the message to your friends, you just talk about it. That's one of the biggest ways to get the message around. So I do it through presentations, but just talking to your friends. And then one of the best ways to make the biggest impact in your community is to work locally with your mayors. So like I went to the Miami-Dade Commission meeting and spoke in front of them. Anyone can do that, and they will listen no matter what your age is, because you do have a voice in your community. And you can also help people understand about climate change through my website, which is miamisearise.com, or any of my social media links. I have a bunch of resources, and a couple of my PowerPoints are actually online, and you can use those as well to educate people.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great question. In the back.
Hi.
Oh, wait a minute, let me bring you a mic.
I don't think it's on. David.
I'm really impressed by what you've done.
Thank you.
Being that you're so young, so congratulations to you. That's really, really amazing. Thank you. And my question, is this on?
I think it
my
is.
question-
It's low, but yeah, it's on.
Okay, so my question to you is that I've heard that Tesla is looking at releasing some new solar technology that is roof tile, I guess, solar. And there's a lot of other companies locally that I've seen around that are selling solar panels. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the differences. And my husband and I were actually thinking of putting solar panels on, but then we thought, well, if Tesla's coming out with this better technology, should we wait? What are your thoughts on that? Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard a little bit about it, but most of what I've heard is that the technology won't be out for a while. So if you are interested in putting solar power in your home, I would just go with the solar panels. And an interesting fact about them actually is that over the course of since they've been available, the cost for solar panels has decreased over 99%. So they're much cheaper now, and they're only about 36 cents per watt. So either way, it's probably a good investment for your home, and once it's installed, the bill, so we have a house in the Keys, as you saw, and it's mostly solar powered, and our electric bill ranges from $7 to $15. So it's very, very cheap, and either way, it's probably a great investment for your home.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, going back to alternative energy sources, you touched on solar. Have you been working on anything like Sweden, for example, of reducing our trash and using that for powering things? Is that an option for Florida? Has there been any legislator, moving towards that? It seems like they're kind of at a stalemate, but have you heard anything as far as that?
Not with using trash. I think right now the big push is for Florida to embrace solar power more. Through the amendments and through other things. So another example of solar power. So I live in South Miami, and the mayor there has, for the last year, I approached him and asked him if he would work on a solar ordinance with me. So a couple years ago, San Francisco implemented, you might have heard of this, but they implemented a solar law that would require all new construction and any material renovation to require the maximum amount of solar power possible to be installed. And so I approached the mayor of South Miami and I asked him if he would do the same thing with me for South Miami. And so over the last year we've been working on it. I went to his house a few times so we could draft it, and just last Tuesday I presented it to the county commission for the first reading and they passed it 5-0. So now it's going to go to the planning board and then it will go to the second reading, and if it gets passed then it will be implemented in the city. So I think that right now Florida is basically focused on solar power just because it's so available right now, yeah.
Hi, and congratulations on all your accomplishments. In 2008 or 9 or so, I remember watching a documentary about solar power. And it used to be back then, you can get solar for free, literally free, because the counties and the states were giving subsidies to get these for free. Where was that money coming from? I'm just wondering if you know. Because I don't know.
I don't know.
My question is, or I guess the solution would be, we probably can't compete with the utility companies and all their lobbies. But if we, instead of trying to put money to compete against those lobbies, we put money back into the communities to give them free solar or better subsidies. Like Professor Olson, I tried to put solar in my house and it was going to run, one estimate was $30,000 and the other one was $11,000. And it was going to save me about $200 a month. So I do agree it's beneficial, but again, if we, instead of competing with the utilities, we put that money back into the communities and put the utilities out of business, that's a better approach.
Right. So I don't know about the specific documentary that you were talking about. I was only 8 when it came out. So like, for example, what we're doing in the city of South Miami is the solar, when you buy a home, the solar power will be required to be installed on it. That's mandated by the city. Now, there's an alternative. If you really don't want the solar power, the solar panels installed on your roof, you can pay the city for the same amount. So if you're going to have 10 watts on your roof, you pay $40 per watt that would be on your roof to the city. And then the city can take all that money and use it to put those solar panels on other city buildings. So is that kind of what you're talking about? No? Okay. Sorry. I'll look it up and then I can get back to you. I'll give you my card and you can reach out to me and we can talk about that. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Delaney, for speaking out for all of us, particularly you.
Thank you.
One question I'm always perplexed by is why we can't convince more people, politicians and others, that we can retrain people for new jobs, that we can move to new technologies, as you so well illustrated with the horse and buggy to the auto. There's so much resistance in that area and so much fear, and that seems to be the argument that we hear over and over again. We're going to take jobs away if we shut down fossil fuel industries and all the related industries. And I'm just perplexed as to how we can convince people that we can move beyond that.
Well, I think that, again, that comes back to the problem of special interest groups and the utility companies, but I think that the way to overcome that is to just keep pushing forward and working locally. Because there's not like a set way for us to reach out to FP&L and say stop giving people money, or there's not a way for us to specifically we can tell politicians that that's not the case. But again, in their case, money often trumps what's best for their community. So I think we just have to work locally and keep pushing forward and try to implement solar ordinances or other renewable energy ordinances in our local communities. And then the more that we build up those laws and the more people that start to talk about this, then hopefully eventually they'll realize that. So that's what I've been trying to do with South Miami. And like actually today after this, I'm going to be going to the St. Pete Commission and I'm going to be talking to them about implementing a similar solar law. So if we just start to do that all over the state and all over the country, then obviously they're going to have to pay attention to it. So that's kind of what my plan has been.
I have a question. Do you think that we can actually reverse global warming after taking all these steps and putting it into action? Because I've actually seen some research that they're saying that the ozone layer is starting to restore itself, but I don't know how reliable that information is. But do you think that it'll be able to reverse itself, or that we can almost stop the global warming or CO2 crisis?
So right now, our goal is to stop it from continuing more. So like the 3 feet of sea level rise is going to happen. Whether or not we can reverse that, I'm not really sure about that. I think that nature is like obviously amazing and it has ways of restoring itself. I just don't know what exactly it has to do in order to stop sea level rise or to stop climate change. But I'm sure it is possible. We just don't know how yet because we don't know exactly how nature works.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious to know your views on animal agriculture contributing to global warming, because you didn't really discuss that very much.
Yeah, so it's definitely a problem. It's not as big as like man-made carbon dioxide emissions, so that's why I don't really touch on it because I want to get like the big picture basically. But yeah, it is a problem, and I think that it definitely has to be solved and addressed. So.
So my question is kind of similar to hers. So money is a big thing in this, and all these companies are making so much money off of fossil fuels. But isn't there a way that with solar that these companies can also profit, and the money can still be there by just switching to solar?
Can you rephrase that? Sorry, I don't really understand what you mean.
They find their ways to make their money off of fossil fuels and things
Right.
like that. You know, and this is an industry, the solar industry. There's got to be ways for them to be able to fund whatever they're funding in other ways using solar power.
Right, okay. So are you asking me like basically how, if we were to switch over completely to the solar industry, how the same amount of money would be made, kind of?
Yeah, but they think if solar is integrated that they're at a loss and there's no way anymore to be profitable.
Right.
And all I hear is solar is going to be cheaper for you. And I mean, say that you switch over to solar power and there's no actual benefit, profit, or money saving coming on your end, and this money is instead used to help climate change and things like that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing track here.
It's okay.
I think I might be able to answer
Yeah, go for
some
it.
of that from my limited knowledge. Well, one, it's so much lower cost to generate a watt of energy with wind or solar, so they won't make as much profit. Number two, the sun doesn't shine at night, so there's no solar, and the wind doesn't blow 24/7. So they have to still have their fossil plants going until battery technology is vastly improved. So it would be a new cost to integrate the renewables into their existing plants, and they don't want to spend that kind of money to do it. And they enjoy a monopoly right now, so they don't really have an incentive a financial incentive to do it. Would you agree?
Yes, completely. Unfortunately, but yes.
I could give a personal testimony to what Delaney said earlier about the special interests and how they influence policy. In another career, I was in Tallahassee making policy that regulated the utilities on the Public Service Commission. I was appointed by Governor Christ as a consumer representative on that body. They decide how much rates that FPL and Duke Energy and the others can charge. I actually was sitting on that board, subject to confirmation by the Florida Senate. In the 10 months that from my appointment until the end of the session in 2010, when the Senate was to approve the governor's nominations, the FPL spent $10 million to lobby, to get those 2 appointments to the Public Service Commission non-confirmed. they did a fake email campaign from their headquarters in Miami, pretending to be citizens when they were generating them in a sweatshop. They gave contributions or bribes to politicians, including to the Florida NAACP, which you would think should be representing the interests of the poorer part of our communities, the African Americans. As a result, the African American coalition in the Senate voted against our confirmation, which means they were voting against their constituents' interests because of a contribution to their state organizations. That is one little example of how they operate. End of sermon.
Thank you.
There must be other questions. Dr. Rivero.
I have a question. What role do you think that religion played a constructive role in this process? Yesterday, Pope Francis gave Donald Trump some of his writings.
Yes, sorry about that. What role do you see that can religion play a constructive role in this process, considering that a lot of people's perspective are guided by religion and their pastors and those kinds of things? And yesterday, Pope Francis gave Donald Trump. Pope Francis has been one of the most religious leaders out there who's actually been talking about this issue, and he gave some of his writings to Donald Trump. What do you see that other religious leaders can get involved? Is it possible? And have you tried to engage religious leaders?
Absolutely. I think it's actually very important that religious leaders become involved because some of the religious communities just don't believe that climate change is happening because of their faith, which is completely understandable. But it's extremely helpful when religious leaders do believe in climate change because they can make such a difference in their very own community, and which are often large communities. So it's the best thing when a religious leader becomes involved with climate change. So everything that Pope Francis has been doing has been absolutely amazing. And so, yes, I would encourage anyone in the religious community, even if they're not a religious leader, just anyone in the religious community to become involved with climate change topics because they can often make a huge difference.
Any other question? Back. Oh, here's one in front.
So with population increasing, you understand that the on-site solar power would be more difficult to provide at building if we're building upwards. So are you an advocate of building outward or upward?
So I am, okay, by building outward, do you mean like moving?
Destroying forests and developing.
Okay, so deforestation is, I'm not an advocate for that at all.
Okay.
Because when you cut down a forest, forests are basically huge carbon sinks, and when you cut them down, it's like a carbon bomb. They release all of the carbon dioxide that they've ever breathed into the atmosphere. So I'm not a proponent for that. And so I guess, I would say building up, but hopefully, we won't have to build up. So for example, actually in the Keys, a bunch of the houses there are already built up because they're so close to the coast. And a bunch of them have solar power on them anyways. So I don't think it's that big of a problem. But I would say building up rather than building out.
Okay, and then, sorry, a second part.
You're good.
So if we did build up and that we weren't able to provide the power, would you be an advocate for solar farms, or is this when you would turn to nuclear power?
No, I'd be an advocate for solar farms. Yeah, I would choose solar power over nuclear power. It's just that right now the technology for solar power isn't powerful enough to power everything that we would need. So unfortunately, we have to use nuclear power, but as I said, not the one that we have in place today because it leaks. It's a complete mess. There's tritium. Where I live, there's tritium in the bay. It's awful for the environment. So that's why we have to invent these new technologies.
You're making you exercise. So I just wanted to mention one more thing, kind of backing to what one of the students over there said.
During the fall semester here at SPC, my Psychology Honor Society hosted a screening of the Leonardo DiCaprio's film Before the Flood. And one of the things that he mentioned about the meat industry is that the beef livestock industry is contributing to, I think he said, 65% of the emissions, the livestock emissions. And so he suggested that even cutting down red meat consumption to once a week. And that's something that probably all of you could do. I mean, if you don't want to become vegetarian or vegan, you could at least, you know, decrease your red meat consumption to once a week. And he said that that would definitely help reduce emissions and reduce the chances of global warming getting bigger. So
definitely. Yeah, it's like the Meatless Monday thing that they made. Yeah.
Okay, I think, well, we're almost at the hour now, and I don't see any more hands. I wanted to ask Delaney if she would share. I understand you're talking about speaking to groups, as she did the county commission, her example, as she did yesterday before 150 executives from insurance companies around the state at the conference downtown that we sponsored that brought her here. But who are you speaking to this summer as well?
I will be traveling to New York on June 8th, and I'll be talking to the General Assembly at the United Nations. Thank you.
The General Assembly of the United Nations. That, ladies and gentlemen, is one way to get action. Thank you, Delaney, very much for being part of our classes here at St. Petersburg College.
Thank you.